In 1847, Boston became a reluctant sanctuary for thousands of Irish families fleeing the devastation of the Great Famine. They arrived on overcrowded ships, exhausted, hungry, and carrying little more than memories of a homeland ravaged by disease, starvation, and despair. For these immigrants, survival was immediate and unforgiving. Boston's crowded streets and tenements offered no comfort, and every day brought the challenge of finding enough food to feed their families. Yet within these struggles, the Irish carried centuries of culinary tradition, recipes shaped by hardship, and an instinct to turn the simplest ingredients into nourishment that could sustain both body and spirit. Potatoes, cabbage, salted pork, root vegetables, and modest cuts of meat became the foundation of meals that were practical, filling, and deeply tied to memory. Beyond their role as sustenance, these dishes allowed families to maintain a connection to Ireland, offering comfort in a foreign city and a sense of continuity in uncertain times. The food they cooked not only kept them alive, but also began to shape Boston's emerging food culture, leaving a legacy that would endure through generations and continue to influence the city's kitchens long after the famine had passed. The daily lives of Irish immigrants in Boston were shaped almost entirely by the struggle to secure enough food, and their cooking reflected both necessity and resilience. In cramped tenements and small kitchens, mothers and fathers transformed limited ingredients into meals that could sustain entire families. One of the most iconic dishes to emerge from this era was the New England boiled dinner. In a single pot, salted corned beef would simmer alongside cabbage, potatoes, and root vegetables, creating a hearty and filling meal. While unremarkable in appearance, it was practical in every sense. One pot meant minimal fuel, and leftovers could be stretched into hash the following day, feeding the family even when money was scarce. What had begun as a means of survival eventually became a tradition, symbolizing the resourcefulness and perseverance of Irish immigrants, and today, it remains a fixture of Boston's culinary identity during St. Patrick's Day celebrations. Equally vital was Irish stew, a dish that carried the tastes and memories of the old country across the Atlantic. Traditionally made with mutton or lamb, potatoes, carrots, and onions, the stew evolved in Boston kitchens to incorporate cheaper cuts of beef and whatever vegetables were accessible at local markets. These adaptations reflected the realities of immigrant life, where meat was a luxury, and the true sustenance came from the hearty combination of root vegetables and potatoes. Irish stew was more than mere food. It was a symbol of cultural identity, a link to home, and a source of comfort after long, arduous days spent laboring in docks, factories, or construction sites. The act of preparing and sharing stew reinforced family bonds and nurtured a sense of community, reminding immigrants that they could preserve pieces of their heritage even in a foreign and often hostile environment. Bacon and cabbage with boiled potatoes exemplified another form of continuity between Ireland and Boston. Salted pork, simmered to tender perfection, paired with cabbage and potatoes, recreated the simple farmhouse dinners of the Irish countryside. These meals were economical, practical, and deeply satisfying, giving families a sense of dignity amid poverty. Salted pork with cabbage and turnips offered a similar solution, utilizing the cheapest cuts of meat from local docks and markets. Immigrants would soak the heavily salted pork to remove excess salt before boiling it with vegetables, creating a meal that was both filling and flavorful despite limited resources. In a city where hunger was a daily concern, such meals represented ingenuity and thrift, demonstrating the ability to make the most of scarce ingredients while keeping alive the tastes of home. Soups played a crucial role in immigrant households, serving as both nourishment and a way to extend small amounts of food across multiple meals. Barley soup, often prepared with onions, carrots, and potatoes, offered a hearty, inexpensive option that could feed a crowd even when meat was absent. Barley, a long-standing staple in Ireland, continued to serve its purpose in Boston, providing substance and warmth to families struggling against hunger and harsh winters. Similarly, oatmeal porridge, boiled in water or milk, was a daily mainstay that fortified children and adults alike for long days of labor. The simplicity of these dishes belied their importance. They were not just meals but instruments of endurance, instilling energy, health, and resilience in those who relied upon them. Bread, too, was essential. Irish soda bread, quick to prepare with flour, baking soda, salt, and buttermilk, became a staple in tenement kitchens, filling the air with the comforting aroma of home. Its practicality mirrored the resourcefulness of immigrant mothers, who needed food that could be made quickly, fed many, and could be eaten with minimal accompaniment. Brown bread, often made with coarse flour or cornmeal, and sometimes sweetened with molasses, offered another versatile option that could accompany soups, stews, or simply a bit of butter or lard. Bread was sustenance, comfort, and continuity. It reminded families of Ireland even as they navigated the uncertainty of Boston streets. For protein, Irish families relied heavily on preserved fish and meat. Boiled salt cod with potatoes and onions, a dish reminiscent of coastal Irish traditions, made use of affordable, durable ingredients shipped from Newfoundland and the Grand Banks. Families soaked the cod to reduce its salt content and cooked it slowly with vegetables, creating meals that were filling and familiar despite the challenges of immigrant life. Corned beef hash demonstrated the ingenuity of households committed to stretching food as far as possible. Leftover meat and potatoes from a boiled dinner were chopped and fried with onions, transforming scraps into a hearty breakfast that could fuel workers through the day. Meat and vegetable hashes, turnip and cabbage stews with salt pork, and boiled root vegetables in meat broth all reflected this ethos. Nothing went to waste, and every meal became a demonstration of careful planning, creativity, and survival. Potato-based dishes were ubiquitous in Irish kitchens, a reflection of the centrality of the humble spud both in Ireland and in the immigrant experience. Colcannon, a combination of mashed potatoes with cabbage or kale and a pat of butter, provided warmth and comfort with every bite. Potato pancakes or boxty offered a way to repurpose leftovers into something crisp, flavorful, and filling. These dishes were emblematic of both thrift and tradition, illustrating how a single, cheap ingredient could be transformed into multiple meals with varying textures and tastes. Even the simplest vegetables, when combined with ingenuity, could become dishes of pride, sustenance, and familial connection. Vegetables in all forms, whether stewed carrots and parsnips, vegetable pottage with peas and turnips, or a simple combination of boiled root vegetables, filled gaps in diets when meat was scarce. They offered nourishment, bulk, and the ability to stretch limited resources across multiple meals. Cornmeal, though not native to Ireland, became another lifesaver in Boston. Cornmeal mush or grits, often served plain or with a drizzle of molasses, provided cheap, filling sustenance, reflecting the adaptability of Irish families as they learned to incorporate New World ingredients into familiar culinary frameworks. Sweet dishes, though rare, offered small comforts. Fruit compotes made from apples, berries, or dried fruits brought color and sweetness to otherwise austere diets, while toasted bread puddings repurposed stale bread into a warm, satisfying treat that delighted children and adults alike. Bean soups, made from dried legumes and root vegetables, exemplified the most practical forms of cooking, providing sustenance that could feed a family for days while requiring minimal resources. The act of cooking for Irish immigrants in Boston was never merely about eating. It was about survival, identity, memory, and resilience. Every pot of stew, every loaf of bread, every bowl of porridge carried echoes of Ireland, comforted the weary, and fortified bodies against the physical demands of a new and often unforgiving city. Cooking became an expression of resourcefulness, an affirmation of culture, and a tool for forging community. Neighbors shared meals, recipes, and ingredients. Families ate together around cramped tables, and even the simplest dishes became sites of pride and continuity. The food culture that Irish immigrants brought to Boston was thus both practical and deeply symbolic, transforming necessity into tradition and scarcity into culinary ingenuity. Even as these meals were born from hardship, their legacy endured. Many of the dishes developed in Boston's tenements, corned beef and cabbage, fish chowder, soda bread, Colcannon, remain central to the city's culinary identity. They have transcended their humble beginnings to become iconic markers of Boston's Irish heritage, celebrated in homes, pubs, and restaurants. These dishes serve as tangible connections to a difficult past, reminders of the creativity, resilience, and determination that allowed a displaced people to survive, adapt, and ultimately thrive. Through food, the story of Irish immigrants is preserved, a story of endurance, cultural continuity, and the quiet power of shared meals to sustain hope in the most challenging of circumstances. The story of Irish immigrants in Boston is inseparable from the food they prepared and shared. What began as simple, practical meals born of hunger and necessity grew into a rich culinary tradition that continues to shape the city's identity today. Every dish from the humble porridge and soda bread to hearty stews, boiled dinners, and fish chowders carried with it memories of Ireland, the ingenuity of families stretching every ingredient, and the resilience required to survive in an unfamiliar and often harsh environment. Cooking became more than survival. It became a form of cultural preservation, a way to maintain a sense of home and community amidst the challenges of displacement. These foods nourished bodies, comforted weary souls, and strengthened familial and neighborhood bonds, proving that sustenance could also be a source of dignity and pride. Today, when Boston families gather for corned beef and cabbage on St. Patrick's Day, savor fish chowder at a local restaurant, or enjoy a slice of soda bread, they are tasting history. They are partaking in a legacy of perseverance, creativity, and tradition, a living reminder that even in the face of hardship, food can connect the past to the present and sustain both body and spirit.